Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. I'm actually enjoying a mug that my wife just gave me. I don't know if you can see it. She got it from the Wisconsin Historical Society. No thanks, I'm having butter. And I would say truer words have never been spoken. I love butter. I bet you knew that. Anyway, today's question that I'm asking or answering is, if I'm going to get a DSLR, should I get an entry-level one or should I go with a prosumer type DSLR to start with? And we're assuming that that person is going to get a APS-C sensor size DSLR because that's the most common type, and the full sensor sizes are very expensive. So we're talking about that. And the first thing you really want to ask yourself is, do I need a DSLR? Because there are so many excellent cameras out there, from the interchangeable lens cameras to enthusiast cameras to, if you're into sports and things, there's the action cameras that are waterproof that may suit your needs even better. So why would you even consider a DSLR? Because at least in 2014, they're considered the standard, the gold standard when it comes to photography. They are the most accessorizable. They have the most lenses, and they're really built for tough and frequent action. So we're going to talk about two, and I actually have two older DSLRs here. So we're not talking about these particular cameras. We're using them as just illustrations, because every camera line that makes DSLRs or DSLTs, you know, the Sony translucent mirror thing, that's kind of a DSLR, they all have entry level, and then they usually will have one in the middle, and then they'll have a top level camera. So their features will vary from camera to camera. So this is just to get you thinking about the differences in general terms. Okay, so here we have our D3000, Nikon D3000. Nice little camera. I've taken many good pictures with it. And here we have a prosumer or even a professional level camera. This is a D300S. And this actually is a very nice lens that did not come with the camera. It's a 24-70 f2.8. So the first question that people might ask is they might say is, I want the camera that's going to produce the best image quality. So if we kind of go up a few generations to the current times, and we looked at, for instance, a Nikon D3300 versus a Nikon D7100, that's their entry level versus their prosumer level camera, and this would apply to other cameras too, other brands. If I put this very nice lens on this inexpensive, on the beginning level camera, and I took a picture under the same conditions and took it and he had it developed or printed at a very good place, and then showed that 8x10 or even larger picture to a professional, I honestly don't think they'd be able to tell the difference. The image quality in DSLRs is so good that you wouldn't see much of a difference at all. The other question you may ask is, what about low light performance? And a few generations ago, like when this camera came out, there was definitely a difference between the ability for an entry-level camera to take low-light pictures versus a more prosumer level camera. That difference has shrunk to maybe not at all. And so really low-light ability in the entry-level cameras is very, very, very good compared to their several steps up siblings. And so I would say that's not much of a difference too. So the two main reasons why you would want to get a DSLR in today's cameras, again, these are just our little models here, entry level, prosumer, not much difference. So let's take a look at these cameras individually and see what differences there are. So this particular camera, this entry level camera, is going to be much smaller, more convenient actually, easier to pack, much lighter, easier to hold, and it's going to have a lot less controls on the back than a prosumer level camera, and that means it's going to be easier to use. Typically with these types of cameras, the consumer type enhancements come out in these cameras first, and then they migrate up to the newer cameras. So in a lot of entry-level cameras, that's where you first start to see things like scene modes or intelligent auto or tilting rear screens and things like that. They usually appear in the cameras that are designed to attract that first DSLR buyer, and then, believe it or not, they move up their way to the professional cameras later. So if you're interested in those sorts of things or fun filters and all that, you're going to find all those in your entry-level camera. Can you do most of the functions that this camera can do? Can you adjust all sorts of things like shutter speed, aperture, and do that with a fine degree of gradation? Absolutely. All it's going to take is a few little clicks of your mouse, or your little buttons here. After a few clicks, you'll be able to do it. Very simple, very straightforward. And in fact, entry-level cameras often have guides that will tell you exactly what to do. You're also going to have all the things that you want, like a hot shoe, and you're going to have a built-in flash and just about anything that you would need. So with an entry-level camera, you're talking about 95%, I'm just kind of making that number up, of the functionality, maybe even more, of a high-end, much more expensive professional camera at a much less expensive price and a much easier to manage package that's not only lightweight, but when you're getting used to taking pictures, just simpler to use because it has less stuff to do, less stuff to confuse you. So why aren't all the professionals using entry-level cameras? Really, in today's times, they probably could because they're so good. But there are a lot of advantages to a pro-level camera. So why is this camera so big and so heavy? Well, first of all, this camera is made out of plastic. This one's made out of metal that's covered with like a rubbery thing, so it's a lot more durable. Yes, indeed, this thing is loaded with buttons, and you probably can't see it on the video, but there's buttons in buttons on this camera. So you have tons of buttons, and that could be very confusing if you don't know how to use the buttons, but it's really awesome just to click a button if you know how to use the buttons, as opposed to even like click, click, click in a menu. Even if it's 3 clicks away, it's a lot easier to do it with just one click that you can see right here. Now this happens to have a display on top too. This is a black and white display, or gray and white, and this is a color display. And why would you have 2 displays? Well, this will have all of my shooting information out right there, so I can just look down and see it. And in addition, it's black and white, so it's not going to wash out if I'm in a bright light condition where a color display often will. So that's an advantage. What's another advantage? Well, besides just having all the features, everything is ramped up a notch or 2. And those notches will make a difference if you're a professional photographer, less so if you're not. So, for instance, the entry-level camera will have a number of focus points, some of them specialized, called cross-type focus points. The professional camera will have a lot more of them. So the professional level camera might be a little bit better at filming or like shooting sports and things where you have a lot of stuff moving around. The entry level camera may have a flash, which it does, and some pro levels do and some don't. This one does, but this flash can not only flash, but it can also control remote flashes that aren't even connected to the camera. Now you can do that with an accessory with this camera, but that's an extra thing that you have to buy. That's built into this camera. This camera has I'm just thinking, I think this is 1/4000th of a second. I think that's the shutter speed. That's what you get on most entry-level cameras. That's fast enough to stop anything, right? This one goes up to 1/8000th of a shutter speed, and that would only be used in certain very special conditions, like trying to use a very wide aperture on a very bright day, like to blur out the background, but you're outdoors, but you're using a wide aperture. Again, most people probably not so necessary, but it's here if you need it. This camera doesn't, I don't know why they don't do it, doesn't do bracketing, which even simple point and shoots will do bracketing. this camera, like the higher level cameras, will do all sorts of bracketing. And that's, for instance, in exposure bracketing, you take one at the right exposure, you take one overexposed, one underexposed, and you can combine those pictures either within the camera with certain cameras or with software to have a great dynamic range. In other words, you get stuff isn't blown out. You get to see the shadows, you get to see the brights, and you get more detail. So a camera with bracketing is, of course, going to be better. Again, I think that's kind of exclusive. That omission is kind of exclusive to Nikons. This particular Nikon does not have a focusing motor. You have to buy lenses that have focusing motors in them. And that's what they do with all of their lower end cameras. Now that's not a problem because you can buy many, many, many different lenses that have focusing motors. But this one will use those lenses, plus it also has a focusing motor in it, so I can use older Nikon lenses. So if I'm an experienced photographer and I have a lot of lenses around, or maybe I pick up a lens cheap, I'm going to be able to use that with the autofocus function because this has that functionality built in. Other things. You'll get a bigger battery in one of these types of cameras and the ability to accessorize it even more than one of these cameras. So that's why people buy these cameras, right? Because they just give that little bit of extra and that little bit of extra durability and flexibility and control. So if you're out though buying your first camera, I would almost recommend that you buy an entry-level camera unless you have very specific needs, because you're not going to be freaked out by all those buttons. You're going to be able to explore those things slowly, and then you'll save a little money, and maybe you can invest in things like a better lens, which makes a huge difference in your photography, or get a speed light that you could use in future cameras. And you figure that, although I tend to hold on to my cameras, most people after 3 or 4 years are going to want to upgrade to a better camera. By then, the higher grade camera is going to be even that much better than what you could have bought 3 or 4 years ago. So you're going to get a better camera anyways, but you'll still have all those great accessories. So that is my opinion. When would I say you should go with something like this? Well, I would say if you're really technologically minded and you just love spending lots of time learning buttons, that would be a reason. If you have specific needs, so this particular camera is weather sealed, which means that if it rains on it, you can't stick it in the water, but if it rains on it, it's going to be okay. So if you're going to be doing a lot of outdoor stuff in bad conditions, this kind of camera would be the one you'd want to go with. If you're doing just tons of action photography, this has a lot more focus points than this camera, so this will focus better in a lot of adverse conditions, someone running across the field, for instance, so you might want to go with this. But for the vast majority of people, you're going to be able to do everything you want, plus a lot more with the entry-level camera. And the entry-level camera is adaptable in many ways. So maybe this only goes to 1/4000th of a second. Again, I'm kind of guessing at that number. But I could always put what's called a neutral density filter on this camera and shoot at a wider aperture. Maybe this doesn't have a built-in commander mode where I can control remote flashes, but I can buy an accessory, some of them off-brand, very inexpensive, and some more expensive that will control external flashes directly from this camera. So there are all sorts of solutions that are out there if you choose to do it. So I hope that answers the question of, or at least gives you some more information. Again, we're not talking about these two cameras. We're talking about these two classes of cameras, entry level, prosumer, and we're talking about DX or APS-C type sensors. So have a wonderful day, and if you get some time, please give my podcast a listen. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. I'm not from Wisconsin, I'm from Illinois, but who can argue with the statement, no thanks, I'm having butter. Take care.